I'm not going to tell you to delete TikTok. I'm not going to tell you social media is evil. I'm not going to tell you to do a digital detox or go live in the woods for 30 days or whatever the latest productivity influencer is selling this week. What I'm going to do, right now in this video, is show you the actual dollar amount that your phone usage is costing you, in real numbers. Numbers you can go verify yourself after this video, and then I'm going to let you decide what to do with that information. Because you're an adult, and adults make decisions based on facts, not based on somebody telling them what to do. My name is Jonathan. I'm 27, from Miami, and this might be the most uncomfortable video I've ever made. Not because it's controversial, because the math doesn't lie. Let's get into it. Let me start with where we actually are in 2026, because the screen time numbers are at a point right now that I think most people are genuinely not aware of. Americans are spending an average of 5 hours and 16 minutes per day on their phones. That's a 14% increase from just last year. 1 year, 14% jump. We are moving in the wrong direction faster than most people realize, but it gets more specific for our generation. The average Gen Z person spends around 9 hours per day on screens total. And 76% of Gen Z say they already know they spend too much time on their smartphones. Read that again. 76%. 3 out of 4 people our age already know they have a problem. They're not in denial, they see it. They feel it. And as of 2026, nearly 46% of Americans consider themselves addicted to their phones, checking them on average 186 times a day. That's roughly once every 5 minutes during waking hours. Once every 5 minutes. Think about what you can actually build in life if your attention is getting interrupted every 5 minutes. Think about what kind of focus, what kind of deep work, what kind of creative thinking is even possible when your brain never gets more than 5 uninterrupted minutes. The answer is not much. And the economy is structured to benefit from that answer. But here's what I really want to focus on today, because everybody talks about screen time in terms of health, mental health, attention span, sleep. And those things are real and important. What nobody is talking about enough, in a way that actually hits, is the money. So let's do the math that nobody does for you. I want to introduce you to a concept that changed how I looked at every single hour of my day. It's called opportunity cost. Opportunity cost is not complicated. It just means every choice you make has a hidden cost, which is whatever else you could have done with that same time, money, or attention. Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's partner, one of the greatest investors who ever lived, was ruthless about evaluating opportunity costs. He didn't just ask whether something was a good use of resources. He asked whether it was the best available use. And he applied this not just to money, but to time, energy, and attention. Munger understood something that most people never internalize. Every hour you spend on one thing is an hour you didn't spend on something else. And over years, over a decade, those hours compound into completely different life outcomes. Now let's apply that to your phone. The average American spends 5 hours and 16 minutes on their phone daily. Let's round to 5 hours for easy math. Of those 5 hours, realistically, generously, maybe 1 hour is genuinely useful. Work stuff, navigation, communicating with people who matter. Real utility. That leaves 4 hours of what I'm going to call consumption time. Scrolling, watching, reacting, consuming other people's content, other people's opinions, other people's highlight reels. 4 hours a day. Now here's where I want you to actually feel this number. Not just hear it, feel it. 4 hours a day is 28 hours a week. 28 hours a week is 1,456 hours a year. 1,456 hours. Do you understand how much you can build in 1,456 hours? Let me give you some real comparisons. Malcolm Gladwell's famous 10,000-hour rule, the idea that 10,000 hours of deliberate practice produces world-class expertise in almost any field. At 4 hours a day, you would hit 10,000 hours in about 7 years. You could become genuinely elite at something. Not good, not decent, expert level. In the same years you're currently spending staring at a screen. A YouTube channel, the kind that generates real income, typically requires somewhere between 100 and 500 hours of work to get initial traction. At 4 hours a day redirected, you could build that in 25 to 125 days. Less than 4 months at the outside. An online course, the kind that sells for $200 to $500, takes most people 50 to 100 hours to create properly. You could build one in 2 to 4 weeks with redirected screen time. A book. An actual book. Most nonfiction business books are 40,000 to 60,000 words. If you write 500 words an hour, that's 80 to 120 hours. You could write a book in a month. This isn't motivational math. This is actual math about what the hours you're spending add up to when pointed in a different direction. Now let me do the dollar math, because this is the part that makes it real in a way hours don't. Here's the framework I want to use. According to the 2026 cell phone usage report, Americans may spend upwards of $200,000 over their lifetime on a combination of phones, internet, odds, and streaming services alone. And that's before we even calculate what the time spent on those devices is costing in opportunity. But I want to go deeper than the device costs. I want to calculate the opportunity cost of the time. Here's the conservative version of this math. Let's say you're 25 years old. You have 40 working years ahead of you. Let's say to age 65, you redirect just 2 hours a day, half of your consumption screen time, toward building something, a skill, a side income, an investment habit, something that compounds. 2 hours a day is 730 hours a year. Now let's say those 2 hours per day are used to build a digital income stream, the kind I've been building and that I'll talk more about in future videos. Very conservatively, very modestly. Let's say after 12 months of consistent work, you're generating $500 a month from that stream. That's not a lot. That's not the dream number. That's the floor. $500 a month is $6,000 a year. But here's what happens when you stop thinking about it as income and start thinking about it as an asset. If you take that $500 a month and invest it consistently at the historical average stock market return of 8 to 10%, which is what broad index funds have returned over decades, a 30-year-old investing $500 monthly at 8% annual returns would accumulate approximately $745,000 by age 65. $745,000 from redirecting 2 hours of phone time per day. That's the conservative number. That's the modest version. And that doesn't account for the income stream growing, which it typically does if you keep building. It doesn't account for the skills you develop that make you more valuable in everything else you do. It doesn't account for the network you build, the opportunities that come from being visible and consistent. This is what opportunity cost looks like at scale. This is what your phone is actually costing you, not in screen time lectures, but in compounded dollars over a lifetime. Charlie Munger understood that compounding applies not just to money, but to skills, relationships, and reputation. These small, consistent advantages compound over time into massive differences in outcomes. And the practical implication is that starting early and maintaining consistency matters far more than any single spectacular decision. Your phone isn't just stealing your attention, it's stealing your compound curve. Let me be honest with you about something personal, because I think it makes this hit differently than just statistics. When I was running my HVAC marketing agency, building something real, putting in real hours, I still had a screen time problem. Not in the way most people picture it. I wasn't doom scrolling TikTok all day. I was consuming business content, finance content, entrepreneurship podcasts, YouTube videos about marketing and growth. And I convinced myself that it counted, that it was productive. I felt that watching other people build things was the same as building things. It wasn't. I remember a specific period where I was probably spending 3 to 4 hours a day consuming business content, genuinely believing I was investing in my growth, while the actual work I needed to do on my own business was getting the leftover hours, the tired hours, the hours when my best thinking was already spent. There's a term for what I was doing: productive procrastination. It's when you fill your time with things that feel like work but don't actually move your specific situation forward. Watching someone else build a business feels almost identical to building one. Emotionally, you get the excitement, the ideas, the inspiration, but your bank account doesn't move. And here's what I realized when I finally sat with that honestly. I was using other people's progress as a substitute for my own. Every video I watched about someone building something gave my brain a small hit of vicarious achievement, enough to feel like I was doing something, not enough to actually build anything. When I made the decision to sell the agency and transition to building digital products and an online audience, the first real change I made was not a business strategy. It was a consumption diet. I cut my consumption by about 60%. Cold just stopped. And redirected those hours toward creating, writing, recording, building the systems that would eventually generate income without requiring my physical presence every hour. The first month was genuinely uncomfortable. My brain kept reaching for the familiar hit. But by month 2, I had made more actual progress on the things that mattered than I had in the previous 6 months of heavy consumption. That's not discipline. That's just math. I gave more hours to the output side and fewer to the input side. The results followed the hours. Now here's the deeper conversation I want to have, because I think just telling people to use their phones less is almost useless advice. You already know that. 76% of Gen Z knows that. The knowing is not the problem. The problem is that your phone is not competing with nothing. It's competing with discomfort. Here's what I mean. When you pick up your phone and open Instagram or TikTok, your brain is not making a choice between scrolling and building something. It's making a choice between scrolling and sitting with the discomfort of starting something, the uncertainty of whether it will work, the low-reward feeling of doing work that doesn't give you immediate feedback. Building something in the early stages feels bad. It feels slow. It feels like you're putting in effort with no visible return. The feedback loop is delayed by weeks or months. Your brain, which is wired for immediate reward, finds that experience genuinely painful compared to the instant hit of a scroll. So it's not willpower you're lacking. It's that you're asking your brain to voluntarily choose the more painful option in every moment. And that's not a fair fight. The way to actually win this is not to white-knuckle it. It's to change the game entirely. 3 things that actually work, not in theory, are in my actual experience. First, make the building feel smaller than the scrolling. The reason starting feels painful is because your brain is imagining the whole mountain, the entire channel, the entire course, the entire business. That's overwhelming. Your brain looks at that and says, not today. So instead of starting the channel, write 1 paragraph. Instead of building the course, outline 1 module. Instead of starting the business, write down what problem you actually solve. The threshold for starting has to be embarrassingly low, so low that your brain can't justify avoiding it. The momentum comes after you start, not before. Second, remove the first step entirely. The most powerful thing I did when I started building my online presence was removing the friction between sitting down and creating. I had my recording setup ready. My notes were already open. The document was already there. When the urge to pick up my phone hit, the alternative was already set up and waiting. Your phone is optimized to be the path of least resistance. To compete with it, you have to make your work the path of least resistance. Same principle. Third, start measuring what you build instead of what you consume. Most people track their screen time because Apple and Google show it to them, but almost nobody tracks what they built that week. How many words written? How many videos recorded? How many products worked on? How many hours of genuine creative output? What you measure, you optimize for. Right now, most of us are accidentally optimizing for consumption because that's the number we see. Otstein, flip the measurement and you flip the behavior over time. Let me run the comparison one final time because I want this to stick. Person A spends 5 hours a day on their phone for the next 10 years, stays current on trends, watches a lot of people build things, feels informed, stimulated, entertained, has lots of opinions. 10 years later, same income, slightly more tired, a vague sense that time moved faster than expected. Person B spends 3 hours a day on their phone for the next 10 years, takes the other 2 hours and puts them into building one thing consistently. Doesn't need it to be perfect, doesn't need to know exactly where it's going, just builds. 10 years later, a skill that generates income without their physical presence every hour. A financial cushion that didn't exist before. Options, choices. Finds a completely different relationship with money and time. Same city, same economy, same 24 hours. The only difference is where 2 hours a day went. That's it. That's the whole thing. There's no secret. There's no hack. There's no course you need to buy. And I say that as someone who sells courses. The foundational move is free. It just costs you the comfort of the scroll. Wealth is built in the gap between what you earn and what you spend. The people who retire early do so by maintaining a wide margin, living below their means, saving, and strategically turning capital into income-producing assets. The same principle applies to time. Wealth of any kind, financial, creative, professional, is built in the gap between what you consume and what you create. Most people's gap is negative. They consume more than they create. Every single day, flip the gap, start small, stay consistent, let it compound. I'm Jonathan, 27, Miami, and I'm building in public so you can see exactly what this looks like in real time. Subscribe, because in the next few videos, I'm going to start getting specific, really specific, about what I actually built, how I built it, and what the path looks like from where most of you are sitting right now. I'll see you there.